Afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt Harris, and I'm joined by my co-host Dan Mahar, and you are now listening to Off Course, the Two Iron Lefty golf blog podcast. Dan and I have been friends for ages. We've been golf buddies for about just as long, and we're going to take you on a little weird and wild ride that is our golf experience. So we're going to dive right into it. Dan's from the Kitchener area. I live closer to London, but we both have familiarity with the first place we're going to talk about, or the first subject we're going to talk about, and that's Golf North. Dan, you've played probably twice as many rounds at a Golf North courses than I have, simply based on the proximity of where you are. I mean, what's your opinion of them on the whole? Are you a yay or a nay for what they offer the golfing world?
Well, it's funny. I might be a bit of an anomaly in that I'm not sure I'd go heavy into yay or nay. I don't have a whole lot of options around here if you take the Golf North courses out of the mix because there's so many of them. I would fall somewhere in the I'm okay with them. They have a good range of options price wise and skill wise. They obviously err a little bit on the cost cutting measures, so you don't necessarily get all of the course maintenance and customer service aspects you might expect to enhance your experience. So if you're okay golfing around those little annoyances and inconveniences, then the courses themselves are actually quite reasonable for the average golfer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's been a noticeable change of direction for Golf North the last few years. They wanted to add more higher end courses. Like for the longest time, I think all they had for higher end was Mystic down near Dundas, which, I mean, we've both golfed it. It's a fantastic course. It can be brutal under the right conditions, but I mean, they've added Rebel Creek, they've added Gray Silo, which is, one of our favorite courses. They recently added the Ridge at Manitou. So, I mean, they're trending maybe towards the higher end courses, but I think, with that, you get the lower end stuff, like the ones you see in Ferguson, Exeter, and Acton. I mean, having spent 18 years of my life in the Fergus-Laura area and having played Fergus before Golf North bought it and after Golf North bought it, it's still a cow pasture. I mean, it's never going to be, anything more than that because they just won't invest the money in it. So to me, I mean, that kind of takes away from the experience. I hope that their higher end courses don't wind up being the same way. I mean, that's, kind of like when I heard that they had bought Gray Silo, I was like, oh man, I hope it doesn't go south.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And there's definitely a range of courses in their stable, like we mentioned. The ones you talked about, Fergus and whatnot, definite cow pastures. The next tier up, you've probably got some that are passable for the casual golfer. Again, you're not going to get a whole lot of maintenance or service there, though. Fortunately, I think they seem to still be keeping a tab on their higher end ones, like you mentioned, Mystic, Gray Silo. They seem to be maintaining them in relatively good shape, reasonable number of staff there for the most part. So it hasn't been a horror show on that end, but I do think their low end ones, like you said, there's not a whole lot of investment there.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that we're going to be talking about a little later on in one of our other topics. But one of the things that I've noticed about Golf North courses is once they got your money, they're like, yeah, okay, your tee time is here, go for it. And our last trip to Gray Silo was the perfect example of that. We were 3-4 groups deep waiting on the first tee, and it was like that all day long.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. If your golf experience hinges upon being catered to a little bit and feeling like they really want you there and want your business, want to make your experience the best possible, then yeah, some of those Golf North courses aren't going to be for you. There's not, like you said, there's not a whole lot of interaction after you've given them your money. It's pretty much cha-ching and see you next week. So
yeah. And I can remember we were standing there laughing about when you were telling me why we were so backed up. I was like, well, why don't we just start shooting balls at him, see if he gets there. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. A Marshall finally made their way around and resolved the issue. So that made the second half of the round a little bit more enjoyable.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where, again, that's not a Golf North specific problem, but I find that does come up more at Golf North courses where they're just, all right, next one's up, let's file you through. So, yes. I mean, hopefully they get that, resolved, or at least show a desire to get that resolved. That would make the overall experience better, I think.
For sure.
So, I mean, while we're kind of talking about that, I mean, you and I, we're both always talking about where we'd like to go play, and it's, become a little trickier. I mean, you with a family and myself with a couple of businesses on the side here. So, I mean, like, where are some of the places, within, say, 100 kilometers of where you live, um, that you like to play? I mean, what, for your money, like, I'd say $60 is about the average, about, what you're looking at for 18 in a cart. So, like, you got any places, under that, over that you want to throw out there as I mentioned?
Yeah. So if we're talking under or give or take a dollar or two, might be right around that threshold. But I think one that's under for sure has pros and cons, but very close to where I am in Kitchener, of course, is one of the city run courses, which is Dune. Has a lot of pros and challenges to that course. Some cons in terms of pace of play and some layout issues, but good value for the dollar once you're golfing. Again, like the Golf North experience there, you don't get a whole lot extra for your dollar, but it's a challenging course. One of my favorites in that range or slightly under is actually Aeris Valley out between Kitchener and Guelph, trending towards Guelph, a little bit west of there.
Yep.
Very, I've always had a good experience there in terms of customer service, pace of play, and the right level, of course, as well. A lot of elevation there, but some really good looks, really good holes there. 3 nines to play. So that's another one. Another one in that $60 range that I would cite would be Savannah, on the south end of Cambridge, link style course. A couple of holes that are quirky that I don't love, but for the most part, a good experience there. Trending over, slightly over anyway. There's a couple I would cite. So if you had a chance to play Turtle Creek, which is just north of the 401 in the Milton area.
Yeah, the greens live up to the name, I will say that.
They do, yes. Yeah, there's a couple in that area. If you trend south there along Highway 6, Carlisle's another decent track that's a little bit above the $60 range. And of course, you mentioned earlier one of our favorites is Grey Silo in the Golf North stable. It's you have to play that one a little more with your head, but it can be a very scoreable course if you do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, down the road when we start talking about, ranking the courses that we've played or the courses in the area, I'm sure Grey Silo is going to probably pop back up a few times. But I mean, for me, I mean, I like, having lived over that way, I've played all of those courses that you mentioned. But now that I live a little closer to St. Mary's, I found a couple of little, heading towards Lake Huron, I found a couple of gems, and, one of them is Witter Station, which is over near Park Hill. It's nothing fancy for the first few holes, but then you start getting into the character of the course, and you're getting holes with, you got to wrap it around a tree here, you've got to negotiate a tighter fairway there, and it's a lot of fun if you don't take everything so seriously. But the best part about the course are the closing 3 holes. You've got a really long par 3, and then you've got a long par 4, and you close with a long par 5, which if you play it right, regardless of the conditions, you can score on that hole. I mean, the day I was there, I put my second shot up on the hill on the left, and I had a massive tree between myself and the green, and I still managed to walk off with a birdie. So I was pretty, I mean, I was lucky. I'm going to say it. There's nothing about that I can claim was skill. I got ridiculously lucky with my third shot. But yeah, so I mean, that one, it's great value, because even on a weekend, if you want to ride, you're still paying less than 60. I think it's $55. I mean, I don't think you can really do much better than that, especially on a weekend.
No.
Staying in the London area, just near Arva, is Lindenshire. I mean, again, it's got some pedestrian holes to it. I mean, I think every public course will have that. You're not going to get away from that, especially when you're talking about places that are squeezed for land. They don't have the room to just kind of do what they want. But Lindenshire has a couple of holes where, again, it's like you said about Grey Silo. You've really got to think your way. It's not just, pull the longest club that you think you can hit on that hole and whale away, which, okay, you and I have been known to do, and we'll egg each other on the tee box into doing it. But it's one of those courses where, you know, you're going to have your opportunities, but you're also going to have, you know, some really benign looking holes that you walk off with a 7, you go, what the hell happened? But
Yeah.
yeah, again, you know, for what we're talking about here, I mean, it's got a $56 weekend rate, and that's riding, so I wouldn't complain about that greatly. My last one, and I think you'll find this one funny, Wild Winds Golf Links up near Fergus.
Yeah.
I got to know that in my former career as a newspaper reporter in that area. At the time, my boss, God love him, John Roberts, Leafs still suck, by the way. Yeah, he was part owner in the course. I would get to go out there and play quite a bit. And I did notice actually now, though, that they've changed their pricing to $47 across the board, no matter what day. Now, I don't think that includes a cart, but I don't think you're missing out, because I mean, it's a decent enough walk. You've got a little bit of elevation change there, but I don't find it's a problem. So yeah, I mean, trending over the $60 mark. 3 places that I would send anybody to without hesitation. 2 of which I played for the first time last year. Copetown Woods down near Dundas. That's a fantastic course. I can't say enough. The thing I liked about that is that it gives you 5 different options to tee from. And by that, I mean, like, you've got some blue-white combination tees that either gives you a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on, you know, how you want to approach the hole, which I think is a fantastic idea. I wish more courses did that.
Yes.
Yeah, so the other 2 on that list are both London area courses. Fire Rock is out near Kamoka. Unfortunately, that was my first round of the year last year. And after my first 2 shots, it was a bit of a disaster. I mean, rust plus cold didn't really make for a great round, but it's still an amazing looking course. And, you know, I think that's one you and I should go and play together, because, you know, I think we'd have a blast there. And the last one, yeah, the last one's, I think, one that we have played together, Forest City National in London.
Actually, I don't think I've been there. It's going to be, it was one of the ones I was thinking I need to get to. So,
well, I would, if you're going, let me know. I'm there. That is for the money. I mean, you're looking at $78 plus tax during prime season. And that's assuming you can get a decent enough tee time. But at the same time, you know, you're talking about GPS equipped carts. You're talking about a really well looked after course. And it, you know, you've got some holes that kind of loop around the one end of Fanshawe Lake, so you're getting, you know, decent scenery out of it too. But, you know, I wouldn't say there's one plain hole there. I mean, you're talking about a really fun course all the way around. So
nice. Definitely have to get there.
Yeah. So this kind of dovetails nicely into our next topic. I mean, what are 3 courses that you haven't played that you'd love to?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned National, because it's one that I would like to get to. I know you've mentioned good things about it before, and I've heard a few other people that it's their go-to course. So definitely National's on there. Locally, I'm in the Kitchener area, so one that obviously has intrigued me forever that I've never had a chance to play would be Westmount, private golf club, tucked in the city in the older part of Kitchener near the Waterloo border. Forest has had hosted PGA events in the past. Heard decent things. Would love to try that track out.
Nice.
But of course, if I'm going to dream big, to one that I've never played that I'd just love to get a crack at. I've walked a bit of the course, but that's Glen Abbey, of course. Famed old course there in Oakville. Love to try it out once.
Yeah. I gotta admit, Abbey's not on my list. It's one of those things that, you know, you hear all about it, considering where we are, considering it's the home of the Canadian Open, but I don't know. I mean, something about it just never really kind of tweaked my interest. The 3 that are on my list right now, one that's on my list, has been on my list for about 3 years now, and I keep meaning to go there, is Otter Creek over near Otterville. A couple of guys I play with on a semi-regular basis have told me that I'm going to love it. There's apparently one where you have to actually hit out over a gorge to reach the green. And I'm thinking, all right, 3 balls later, I'm good. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just, count my double par and away I go kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I've been itching to play that one for a while now. Another one, and this dates back to my time in university down in Windsor, is that I'd love to go play the Ambassador Golf Club. I've heard really good things. I've heard it's sort of a mix of mostly links and some parkland golf. So, it's one of those ones where, you look at the pictures and you go, yeah, it looks worthwhile. So, but I mean, if I'm going down there and making a weekend out of it, I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 or 3 courses in that area just to make it worth the while. The last one is, sort of like what Oakville is for you, Cobble Beach up in Owen Sound.
Yes.
I hear everybody who's ever played there raves about it. Getting a tee time is, a different story, especially now that tee times have become that much more of a premium. But I hear it's more than worth the wait. So yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that one, because that was actually, if I had a 4th on my list, it was Cobble Beach.
Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. So, I mean, one of your answers before kind of made me chuckle, and that kind of, helps us arrive at our next topic. Is that, what is it that a course can do? And I'm not saying intentionally do, but I mean, these are kinds of things that they, suddenly become known for, right or wrong. What is it that they can do that drives you away and says, you know what, I'd rather go spend my money elsewhere?
Yeah, for me, the experience doesn't have to be pristine. I'm not the biggest purist. So when it comes to golf course conditions, obviously, as long as they're maintaining the greens and the fairways to a reasonable extent, I don't mind playing off a little bit of rough. I know some guys I golf with get frustrated with courses like Dundee, which I like. I find it's a challenging course, but they find the conditions, the course is not maintained well enough. For me, it all comes down to pace of play and how they're managing the customers on the course, marshaling, that kind of thing. So I've played a number of courses where the clientele generally get it. They're moving at a reasonable pace, but the staff is there to facilitate that as best they can and keep things moving. And the marshals are out and about, visible, which helps. They don't even have to say anything a lot of times. Just being present keeps people on task. So for me, that's what it is. So the flip side of that coin is if you want to drive me away from a course, don't do those things. And if I'm going to be brutally honest and pick on a couple courses, obviously I find the City of Kitchener courses, Dune and Rockaway in particular, really bad for that.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get around in under 5 hours at either of them, it seems. A lot of slow play, very little marshaling, staff that don't seem to care too much about pace of play. Had a couple occasions at courses like that where I'm not by any stretch a complainer, pretty low-key, mild-mannered, reasonable. But when you're 5.5 hours into the round and you're still 3 deep on every tee because they've either overbooked or not enforcing pace of play.
Yeah.
And when you raise it with them, you get the eye roll and barely even an answer, staff that just want you to go away. There's not a lot of motivation for them to deal with the issues. So that's the big one for me. And I touched on it there briefly too, is the overbooking.
Yeah.
I think for me to have a proper pace of play, aside from marshaling those who don't know etiquette and keep pace of play, it's the ability to space your tee times out just enough. In Golf North, the one big knock I have on them is a lot of their courses, they go at the 8-minute intervals. And I know that's fairly standard in the industry, but for some of the more challenging courses or longer ones, 8-minute intervals, you're on top of each other pretty quickly. Yeah. Whereas an extra minute or two, even going to 9 or 10, makes a big difference. And I found that last year during the pandemic when courses were busy. Those that held the 10 to 12-minute intervals were a dream to play. Yeah. Those that started to go back to 8 minutes, I mean, I had some holdups. As much as I like Ray Silo in Golf North, I had some ridiculous holdups where, you're waiting 5 minutes on every shot.
Yeah.
So those are the things that really drive me away.
Well, I mean, that's a completely valid point. I mean, it's very similar to mine. Is unregulated slow play. I mean, I can live with the fact that, in current environmental conditions, the course isn't always going to be, as lush green as what's behind you. You're, going to run into some crunchy rough. You're going to run into some down branch. I don't care about that. What I do care about is the fact that if you've gone to the trouble of having marshals, then make them do their job. And, you know, I had to chuckle when you brought up both Dune Valley and Aeris Valley. I've had poor experiences at both. I mean, I was with you the day that we played Dune Valley on a Sunday. We teed off, what, like 7:30 in the morning. We were the second, like we thought we were the second or the third ones on the course. And then we ran into a group of students, we'll call them. And, you know, suddenly we were sitting there going, how did we get so backed up? I mean, we were what, 4 groups back of this particular group of people, which I will say was more than 5. And
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, that's something for the course to settle themselves. That's not up to me to settle. But yeah, the marshal comes around and goes, "So you guys enjoying yourselves?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, why? It's a beautiful Sunday. It's sunny." And like, I mean, yeah, it's really hot out here waiting, you know, 15 minutes to play one shot. And he
Yeah.
just kind of looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and drove off. I'm like, if you're not going to do your job, then what are you doing out here?
It can ruin an experience in a hurry, and you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes it can be a mixture of the marshals not doing their job. In that instance, they're just out for a Sunday stroll to collect a paycheck or get free rounds or whatever they're looking for.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I've run into a little bit, and this is definitely the case at Rockaway and a couple other courses, Maryhill being one years back, where there's an older member clientele
Mm-hmm.
that don't love even though the guests bring in enough revenue to keep the course functioning and subsidize their play, they don't like the guests, and they make it pretty known, and they can be treated pretty roughly out there. Sometime when we have time, I'll tell you about some stories I have, particularly from Maryhill, with that, where they went out of their way to ruin the experience. And
Yeah.
in all honesty, I haven't been back to Maryhill.
Yeah. I'll have a similar experience to share with you when we get a little further under our topic list. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much to just, you know, go up to a group and say, would you guys mind either picking up your pace or letting the next group go through? I mean, if you're out there and you're taking selfies on every hole, I don't think you're aiming to be done in 4 hours anyway. So it's not going to make that big of a difference to let a couple of groups go past.
Especially, I would add to that, if I could quickly, golf balls, doesn't matter what you're playing, they're between about $1 a ball and $5 a ball. So if you've had your cursory 30 to 60 seconds to look, if you're not seeing it, drop one, please.
Yep. Yeah, your score is not going to be fantastic if you're doing that 6 holes in a row anyway. So just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Drop it and move on.
Yeah.
But I mean, that again, you know, first podcast, and we're segueing beautifully into the next topic. I mean, we're going to turn to talk a little bit about gear. I know you're not a big gear guy. I'm a confessed gear. Well, okay, if you ask my wife, I'm a gear idiot, but okay, I can live with that term. We've talked off and on over the years about this as I've kind of peeked through your bag to see what you play. And, you know, is there a club in there that, you know, you can't play without, that like you can't put a good round together if it's not in there?
So yeah, I'll answer this maybe slightly differently than you're angling for. I think you're talking about if it wasn't there, I'd be toast. But it's always there. So I will say if my round is not going to go well if it's not working for me, but it's the club I rely on a lot, and that's my Hybrid 3, where it can be, when I'm playing well, I never miss hit it. It's the flight's pure long. It saves so many holes for me, especially if you don't get off the tee great on a longer hole. It's brilliant. If it ever leaves me where I'm not feeling it or gets in my head, the round can be a long one, because the only other clubs I would say, those mid irons are pretty pure for me. So the 5 and 6, I seldom miss hit those, so I can usually rely on those. Those are the ones where if things aren't going well in a round, can pretty much always pull out the 6 with confidence.
Yeah, see, like for me, and this is a recent revelation, is that I changed putters last year. I was lucky enough to find a company out of Buffalo that does custom putter work, T-squared putters, in case anybody wants to check those guys out. But the putter that I got from them was night and day from anything else I'd been using, and it gave me so much confidence. Like my first 3 rounds with it, I think I had, you know, rounds of, you know, less than 30 putts 2 out of 3 times. Like it was just I couldn't believe the sense of confidence I was getting just from the stroke, the weight, the feedback, everything. I mean, it really transformed my game last year. And the other one I would say in my bag that, again, it's like you with your hybrid 3 is my fairway wood. If I'm playing that, I don't have to worry whether or not my driver is playing nicely. And I honestly don't have to worry about, okay, what am I going to do if, I come to a hole where, I don't want to drop all the way back to a hybrid and sacrifice all of that distance off the tee. So, out comes the fairway. And yeah, I mean, that those two clubs, I think, really kind of helped me put together some of my best rounds last year.
Yeah.
Mind you, on the flip side of that, and I got to kind of chuckle, is that, my 4 and 5 iron, I wouldn't cry if somebody walked off with them. Because half the time I'll hit it and I'm like, oh, okay, bye-bye. And I'm just like, all right, drop another one, forget it, next club. But yeah, I honestly, I don't know what it is. I used to love hitting a 4 iron. And the ironic part is I carry a 2 iron in my bag for certain tee off situations. I can hit that fine. Can't hit a 4 iron anymore. Don't know what it is.
Yeah, I always find the 4 pretty trusty too, but yeah.
So are you the kind of guy, like I know you got new clubs a couple of years ago. Are you a brand loyal guy? Is like, or you have Callaways, right? You're comfortable with that?
Yeah, kind of almost by accident. So I have Callaway irons and I have a Callaway driver, and I have kind of mix and match some of the specialty clubs. But I definitely would not say I'm brand loyal. In the early days, I mean, I don't want to say I was totally a budget golfer, but I didn't want to spend a fortune on it because I knew I was never going to be on the PGA. It's more enjoyable. But at the same time, golf equipment makes such a difference that I wanted to invest enough that I wasn't shooting myself in the foot before I even got out there. So the last set of clubs was actually the first time I really did any kind of investigation at the store, where I did some of the analysis with the swings and whatnot, and it helped. I like my new irons; they're fine. The big win was the driver. I learned some of the things I was doing wrong or I needed in my driver that I hadn't even cared about before. So I took my driver from, being a completely, I could always hit distance. Distance was never a concern for me, but every second or maybe every second or third one would be slightly offline or way offline. Whereas now I'm probably 9 out of 10 are good shots off the tee. So that, don't want to say I'm totally brand loyal to Callaway, but it's that seems to be what I'm gravitating to lately.
Yeah. Well, a number of years ago, after my clubs had been stolen, I had, replaced them with a complete Callaway set. And I mean, it was okay, but I found certain things were a little lacking. I wasn't completely comfortable with certain clubs in the bag. And I started, like, this was before I even knew that you could buy iron sets independent of everything else. So, that was an education for me, to say the least. But now I think I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different club manufacturers, and I use Vice golf balls because they're cheap. I mean, but they stand up too. I mean, comparatively speaking, I mean, you were talking about, whether it's $1 ball or a $5 ball, just drop it and keep playing. Yeah, I've been really happy with those ones. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that you see companies like, and sometimes, you'll see companies change things up twice in the same season, which honestly, I don't know how the average golf consumer, unless you've got a, platinum credit card that you can just walk out and say, yeah, I'll take one of everything on here and see what I like the best. I mean, that's not going to happen for me. So, but yeah, I mean, it's worth investigating, I think, to, take the time and, go see what works best for you. Because, I was of the opinion for a long time that, oh, well, if I hit the driver great, then the rest of that company's clubs have got to be just as good. And, I found out through a protracted process that wasn't the case. So yeah, it's one of those things. But, that being said, if, Titleist or PXG want to sponsor us and, toss out a few sets,
happy to try them out.
we're listening. We're listening here, guys. And so I don't know whether you want to admit this with your wife possibly listening to this podcast at some point, but what's the most you've ever spent on a club?
No, it's probably more embarrassing to admit it to the listeners than my wife, because like I said, I can be pretty frugal when it comes to golf. So it was that the Callaway driver I'm currently using.
Yeah.
Essentially, I went into year end and I looked for, they had their new line out, which of course you're paying dearly for a driver there, and $500-$700 for a good one. So I just took the year before model, which was still in store, and they had it on for $200, and that's the most I've ever spent on a club. So it was one that had kind of dropped in price by a couple $100 over the course of the season, and the technology for my game is not enough different for it to matter, and that was a terrific investment. So that is the most I've ever spent on a club.
Yeah. Well, I got to admit, I'm at the other end of the spectrum on that one. I spent $650 on a putter, and no offense to Mr. Scotty Cameron, but it wasn't worth it to me. I tried to see what, everybody was so excited about, and honestly, it didn't do it. It was just one of those things where I suppose in the right hands, I mean, maybe if I was better, I don't know, maybe it would have made a bigger difference, but I didn't.
$650 buys you a lot of gimmies. So
oh, that's 10 feet. Oh, no, we're good. Yeah, pick it up. Yeah, no, it was one of those things where, looking back on it, I was single at the time. I didn't have a lot of, financial responsibilities. So I thought, yeah, I'll treat myself. I'll see what all the fuss is about. And yeah, I just think of all the rounds of golf I could have paid for instead of paying for that thing. So
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well. So yeah, keeping with, spending money or not spending money, as the case may be, are there any kind of trends that you're kind of keeping an eye on as far as either, new courses, new tech, new, whatever?
Not really. I would say like the loosely follow the trends. I know I've shifted golf shoes a couple times. I haven't really gotten too far into the rangefinder. I've used some of the apps where you can figure out where you're on the golf course and how long you have to the pin. I find those semi-helpful, but I would probably say it's 3 to 4 times around where I find it useful, where your eyeball read was a little bit different than what the GPS is telling you. And of course, it's usually correct. So, so that would be probably the closest I've come to the trends. But I find trends, I tend to be a behind the curve guy, because often they come and go, and people find they didn't really make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Though the putter is one I'm looking at trends on, because I feel like I can get more out of my game there.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to dedicate an entire podcast to, my failed putter experiments and your samplings. So,
yes.
I got to admit, I don't know that this is so much a recent trend, but I've had adventures with my golf shoes like the last couple of seasons. Sprung a leak in the one, seems let go in the others. I'm just like, all right, that's not an uncommon problem for me with shoes to begin with. But I have to admit, I'm a little more than a little curious about this whole spikeless golf shoe, because I look at a guy like John Rahm and how much power he hits with, and I'm sitting there going, you don't have anything anchoring you to the ground. How are you able to do this?
Yeah.
So there's got to be something there, and I have to admit, I'm more than a little curious, and they look comfortable. So that's one of those things where, okay, we'll see. I will admit though that another area is, colored golf balls have made a comeback, and sadly, there's a reason I wear these, and there's a reason I've gone to a neon lime golf ball. I can pick it out way better. I can barely see a white golf ball anymore. So, you never want to admit that the gray's sticking around, but
well, there was a stigma to color golf balls for a while, the old mini golf balls and whatnot. But sometimes things are just sensible, man.
Yeah, that's true. I'll drink my prune juice before we play next time. So yeah, let's move in a different direction here. Over and underrated courses. I mean, we've all got our own little lists as to, it's not to say that we wouldn't go back to play an overrated course, but maybe you're not going to be in as big a rush to go back. So, I mean, You got one in mind?
So overrated. I mean, there's always a few that uh, it depends how you're measuring that. But if I'm evaluating based on what they're asking you to pay to play there versus what they're actually providing, I'll be honest and I'll say that I thought Galt Country Club was a little overrated.
Oh,
It's a historic one. It's fairly well known. It's got a fairly hefty pay in to be a member there, a partial member, and got the opportunity to play there. And I mean, it's a decent course. Nothing terribly wrong with it. But I believe it was 110 that round.
yeah.
I could not justify going back at that rate. I just didn't find it was worth the pop. And previously I might have said something similar about Rebel Creek in terms of price to value, but they did bring their prices down slightly. I'm not sure what it's going to be this year,
Yeah.
but years back it was well over 100 as well, and very nice course. So I don't know that I'd say the course is terribly overrated, but for me it's all price to what you're getting. And so I do like Dundee. I like playing there. I find it's a challenging course, very difficult for me to score there. The greens are tough to stick on, very tough reads and whatnot.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's not the most highly maintained course, a mid-range Golf North one. So I would say it's also slightly overrated in terms of what they charge. It's flirting with that. If you want to ride, you can be up in the $65-$70 range there, which I would expect maybe a little more effort into course maintenance there.
Yeah. I can see that. I've played there. Well, I've played there twice, both times with you, and I would agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of the greens there. But my most overrated course, and this is one that the guys I work with rave about, and I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. And that's Pine Knot over by Dorchester. It's you're talking about between, depending on when you play. I played it midweek, but I was also on vacation that week, so I think I paid 50 some odd bucks, and that was riding. But I it didn't live up to the hype anywhere close to what these guys were talking about. You open with back-to-back par fives, which you would think would be enough to get your game stretched out a bit and get you kind of into the round, but I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it. And it's funny when you mentioned the experience that the members gave you out at was it Maryhill?
Maryhill, yes.
Yeah, we got paired with husband and wife member duo, and the husband was a royal dick. Like he spent, I would say, 17 of the 18 holes pissing and moaning about the group in front of us. But they're not qualified to be there. Oh, what's he doing? Oh, he can't hit that club. And I'm assuming he knew them, or I don't know. But yeah, he was a jerk, and that really kind of like, if the other members at this place are like that, I don't want to come back here. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because I was looking forward to it, but at the same time, when that's what you're listening to for 18 holes, I'm just like, okay, thanks.
Yes.
I'll go spend my money somewhere else.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, other side of that coin, underrated. I mean, there's lots of places that could make that claim to being underrated. You mentioned mine. It's Savannah. I think that I don't think that course gets nearly enough credit for being challenging and fun to play at the same time.
Well, I would totally concur, and it was probably the course I played most last year. I have a number of friends that really like that course, and like I said, there's probably 4 or 5 holes that I don't love the layout. They're a little quirky, but for the most part, there's a lot to like about that course. That it's challenging, it's reasonably priced for what you get, and I can't recall having any pace of play issues there either. People that go there tend to know how to play, so the experience overall there tends to be good. If you play really well there and you're on your game, you'll score well. If you don't, it's going to punish you. So it's kind of right in that wheelhouse that I look for when I golf. So
yeah. I mean, for me, it's got a lot of the great elements because you've got elevation changes, which aren't severe, but they're enough to get your attention. You've got just enough water to make it interesting, but not so much that you're sitting there going, oh my God, I'm going to run out of balls before I get back to the clubhouse after 9. And you've got they maintain it really well, which makes for me a much fairer judgment of where your game is. I mean, if you go to a course once and then come back, but you're playing it under completely different conditions because they either haven't bothered or they don't know what they're doing, it really kind of taints how you see that course. Whereas I don't think there's ever been a time, regardless of the season, that you and I have played there or that I've played there, that I came away feeling cheated. I mean, it's always been a great experience for me, and I find every time I play there, I'm getting just that much better at managing the problem areas that I know exist on that course for me.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know why people roll their eyes when I tell them I'd love to go play there with them, but maybe I'm just playing with the wrong guys.
No, you're right. You need to manage your game there, and I find that I've played it enough that sometimes I can be a slow learner because I know on certain holes you cannot play it a certain way. And if you take that into account after playing there a few times, you're in good shape. But it's really a course that if you miss your spots, it could be a long day.
Yeah. Well, last thing we can talk about today is, something that's maybe a little introspective. I mean, everybody has challenges to putting together a good game, like we've been talking about. But what do you find is yours? I mean, it could be any number of things, given the fact that, as you said, we're not pros, but it's one of those things where everybody's different. So, what's on your list of things that you have to overcome to play better?
Well, I think mine. If I could do two, I'll do two. One kind of technical, one more existential, I guess, if you will. But I think most golfers will relate to this. The existential one for me is patience. I'm not the most patient golfer, and I
Really?
tend to. Well, exactly. Like I know it's shocking. So I not only can I get frustrated with the slow pace of play, but even when there's not a slow pace of play, I'm just kind of wired to just go play my shot. And sometimes I don't always think it through. I don't always set up properly. Horrible for backing away from a shot when I'm not feeling comfortable, not set right. And that I know that's costing me 10, 12 strokes around. And I still have this hustle mentality that I need to get over. So that's the existential one. The technical one, of course, and this is very relatable to everyone, is the putting. And the way I describe myself is probably the world's best putter that never one putts. And that's, I know if I want to score well and I want to get into the really low scores and elite scores, you got to put up a number of one putts in a round, or at least a few. I am always around the hole, very rarely in it. So I could be 30 feet away and I'll leave myself a 1 footer. I could be 5 feet away, I leave myself a 1 footer. It's just so I got to sort out what it is about my putting game that I generally get the weight right, line reasonably right. I'm just not hitting the heart. So
Mm,
so those would be the two that I find are my biggest challenges.
yeah. Well, like you said earlier, you're kind of in that putter experimentation mode. You're finding a new flat stick. Trust me, I've been there. It's all kinds of fun trying to sort that out. Mine, I would say it's finding the time to play and practice so that the things that I know I need to work on, I can work on. And oddly enough, it's not something that you grab your clubs and head to the range that sorts it out for me. And it's like I need to know, okay, I'm 157 yards out from the hole. Is this a wedge? Is this something else? I mean, but I also have I'm like you, that I need to learn to reset myself if I have a bad shot. It's that, okay, instead of getting angry and causing my score further damage, back away and reset it all mentally. But like those are the types of things you just can't figure out on the range, right? So for me, it's I have moments of brilliant golf sandwiched around ones that are cringeworthy, and
Yeah.
I'd like to flip that around, have maybe one cringeworthy moment around, and have the rest come into form. But again, it's finding the time to be able to go out and play and do all that. So
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, is there anything else that we can cover today that would make this first podcast fantastic for you?
I think I'm good. Although I will point out, Matt, just because we were talking so much about Savannah, that I did last year achieve something that I would challenge any other golfer to accomplish, and that is I hit the same stone wall 3 times on the same hole. And that is on 7 on the front of Savannah. There's an old mill wall mid fairway, right where you want to land. Hit it off the tee. dropped down 20 feet behind it. Ego came out thinking I can easily loft it over this and get to the green. Hit the top of the wall, bounced almost back past the tee. Next shot, it had to go about 200 yards up the middle. Same thing, flirted with that again, hit the very corner of it and bounced the other fairway. So 3 times hit the same wall in the same hole. And managed to somehow salvage to 7 on that hole. I'm not sure how, but
we are going to have to contact management there and see if we can get a plaque put up on that wall just for you. And then
I think so.
We'll have a little competition the next time we're there to see who can top that.
Yeah, I'd like to see DeChambeau do that.
Well, knowing him, he'd put it through the wall.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
but he's another topic for another day. So thanks for joining me on the podcast. I hope we're going to have a lot of fun doing this together. And so thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Take care.